Hi, I'm Abdul Saad, clinical psychologist at Vital Mind Psychology here in Sydney, Australia. You can check me out at vitalmind.com.au. Also check me out at Facebook, just search for Vital Mind Psychology. And if you're interested in seeing me for online coaching, you can check out all the details for doing that on my website, again, vitalmind.com.au. So in this new installment in the series on empaths and helping empaths to understand themselves and I guess their journey toward increasing emotional maturity, I want to talk about integrating the adult and developing the warrior. Now, through inner child work, what becomes apparent is the witnessing and protective adult self state going offline when the pain of the inner child is activated. And we see this very clearly, or individuals begin to see this much more clearly when they begin to work on their inner child and integrating their inner child. So that is when the adult feels overly distressed and overwhelmed, the inner child is left to fend for itself. It's abandoned by the weaker adult self state, which cannot contain, protect, and stabilize the energy of the inner child. And this, for example, is what occurs when a narcissistic individual love bombs an empath. The inner child is activated and is flooded, and the adult self state largely leaves the scene. Now, once the inner child has been safely accessed, it feels reassured that the adult can witness, bless, and contain it. Like I said, the analogy of a king doing the same thing. There is an ease which begins to develop in which the inner child can be seen, nurtured, and protected. Before this integration, the adult self-state abandons the child, leaving it to its own devices to deal with the distress. And of course, the inner child is limited in how it can cope. It can withdraw, it can lash out, it can confront, but all of these ways of relating to distress actually reflect at some level a level of emotional immaturity because the adult has left the scene, is offline. So this is why no matter how much the adult learns about narcissists or high conflict personalities or people, or understands the people that are causing the distress or focuses on them, no matter how much the adult may learn at an intellectual level, if the adult and the child aren't integrated, then the child's self-state is very easily activated and rewounded until both states are integrated and the adult and the warrior, which I'll be talking about today, begins to form a protective shield over the inner child. Because what the child desperately wants to feel is reassured and trusting in the adult self or self-state. The inner child needs to know that when it speaks, when it sends the adult the signals of distress, that the adult will listen to these and take the appropriate action. Now, once the adult can do this, because the adult operates in real time, as I explained in a previous video, there is a greater access to much more resources, to much more flexible ways of thinking and dealing with distress than what the inner child can have left to its own devices. The integrated adult, no longer split off from the inner child, but in communion with it, now becomes imbued and energized by an entirely different view of the self and of others. And this is where we see the distinction between empaths who may be less emotionally mature and empaths who are operating at a higher level of emotional maturity. The contract or the covenant between child and adult is restored, and the adult is empowered to guide, heal, and protect the child, and the child can be more free now to express its life force without fear. In essence, we reparent our inner child to heal it from its wounds And by healing our inner child, we begin to heal and strengthen the adult, which is no longer split off from the inner child. And in doing so, we begin to rise above our own, what you might call ego identity, our own personal narrative and life history and wounding. Because if we're stuck at that level, we're very limited in how we view the world and view others. Because the adult and the warrior self-state can only come into its fullest human expression when it is grounded in something more than its own personal ego identity, narratives and wounds. It's the personal story. We fully transform and heal when our ego identity is grounded and connected to that which is beyond us, to the transpersonal. And if we haven't done the work on healing the inner child, on accessing the adult, on recognizing our blind spots, on taking ownership of the things that we need to own in terms of how we contribute to dysfunction in our lives, then we can't fully transform and be integrated. So adult clarity, perspicuity, and groundedness overtakes either a naive innocence or a cynical hard-heartedness, which is a defense against the pain of a wounded inner child. We're transformed from either being naive innocents who deny our own power and project it onto others, or hard-nosed cynics who cling onto what little power we have and disempower others. And again, empaths with lower levels of emotional maturity can do this. And this is why in the body of work I'm putting out here on YouTube and through my own practice, in seeking to truly empower empaths, we need to empower them in a holistic way where empaths and highly empathetic people understand both their strengths and their liabilities and working on integrating these. So once we achieve this level of integration, once the inner child is no longer split off from the adult and the adult gains a different perspective, and the inner child is actually there not as a wounded inner child, but as an inner child that animates the life force of the adult, flows freely through the adult, we now begin to have the fertile ground for developing our own inner authority, our own inner warrior energy in its fullest and most integrated form. And warrior energy in its fullest and most integrated form doesn't mean we begin to confront people, we become aggressive, we call people out. Now that may be appropriate in very limited contexts, but it certainly is not the norm if you're accessing your warrior in its fullness. The adult, aided by the warrior, becomes impenetrable or much less vulnerable to narcissistic manipulation, because the narcissist can only access us through the inner child when it had very little to no protection. An adult with a healed and integrated inner child, with access to true warrior energy and a connection to something greater than themselves, a higher power, that transcends their own ego narrative, their own wounding. Such an adult immensely decreases the chances that they will be caught up in the games that narcissists play. And this is where we see that healing the empath-narcissist dynamic, truly healing it, does require a truly integrative, holistic, and ultimately spiritually grounded approach, which combines the best of what modern psychology has to offer in terms of psychotherapeutic interventions and knowledge of human personality and human development, with a transpersonal vision of the human condition. Now, the adult with access to the warrior and an integrated inner child possesses the following attributes. We begin to see these are some things that we may see, or some sort of guides. One is the individual becomes more economical in their speech. They will be less verbose. There's more listening. There's more taking in of information. There's more observing. There is truly a higher expression of empathy, and to sit with oneself and to sit with others and to observe and to take in and not have this need to fill in all the pauses, not have a need to debate and argue points, to try and win people over, to cajole, to convince, to preach. There's a gravitas that begins to develop. And by gravitas, I mean a solemnity of character. And this doesn't mean that one loses their ability to be lighthearted or joke or be fun or funny. In fact, childlike playfulness increases, but in its fullest expression. It's not a defense against anxiety or emotional pain, but it's truly grounded in the person's being. It's in flow, and it is a self-possessed a groundedness and a self-possessed way of being with oneself and with others that is at ease. Another aspect is one acquires the ability to see through the games people play, but not with judgment, hostility, and condemnation, not with the attitude of confronting people, but with discernment, compassion, and empathy. And for those people we come across in our lives that are truly malicious, truly disturbed, we have the adequate tools, skills, and insights to shield and insulate ourselves against those people. And we recognize that for the vast majority of people in our lives, they probably don't fall into that category. So we have an inner sliding scale of different repertoires, skills, and approaches depending on the person we're dealing with. We don't immediately assume that an individual is a narcissist or is gaslighting us, which is a term, by the way, which is so misused today in the online narcissistic community that I'm afraid it's really losing its meaning. The things that people think gaslighting is when it really isn't. If someone disagrees with them, or if someone has a different perspective, for some people, they take that as gaslighting, where it really isn't. You do yourself a disservice when you jump to that conclusion, because you corner yourself, you lose your adult perspective. It doesn't mean that gaslighting never occurs, but if you apply that too broadly, then you're operating from an inner child energy that's feels cornered and feels wounded. And where do I go with that? If I believe if you get to a point, for example, you think everyone in your life is gaslighting you, that's usually a sign that you need to reach out and you need the help of someone that can guide you and help you understand yourself and others through a broader perspective. And this is something I think where the online narcissistic community needs to be more accountable for, in not creating an echo chamber for people and in terms of the conclusions they've come to about others in their life, which then are verified solely through YouTube or YouTube videos without any inner growth work on the part of the individual. Okay, where was I? So the warrior is not necessarily violent or angry, but is comfortable with accessing anger when it's needed to protect the innocent, weak, and oppressed. It won't stand for manipulation, for lies, for plundering of the inner child energy either in themselves or in others. And in not standing for it, there isn't this confrontational, reactive hostility, but an inner grounded authority in how one responds to people who are truly character disturbed and malicious. So through this transformed state, we are no longer obsessed with narcissists and the games they play. We no longer find ourselves going from relationship to relationship with individuals who abuse us, and we no longer exclusively look outward for answers. Instead, we begin to look inward. Now, here are some suggestions for developing more of the adult warrior energy and self states in conjunction with doing inner child work. One is to simply make a conscious intent to talk less and observe more, because verbosity and idle talk stifles mental clarity. Consciously cultivate decisiveness in your life. Root out procrastination. Make decisions and learn that you are able to deal with the consequences. And these need not be life-altering decisions. It could be you activate your inner adult warrior state when you finally tackle cleaning your office, and who does that remind you of? Starting intermittent fasting, organizing a budget and getting your finances in order. You drive out the victim mentality from your inner world. You may have been victimized and are not responsible for all that you have experienced, but you are responsible for how you deal with it from here on in. Through working on healing your trauma, healing your inner child, and allowing it to be free to animate the adult who you are, you begin to express the best version of yourself. So with that, I think this series is coming to a conclusion. I think I've touched on the core self states. I won't be doing a video on the inner critic because I think I've done justice to that in a previous video on the judge. I want to take a bit of time to think about maybe doing 1 or 2 more videos on this series, maybe to wrap things up. Perhaps a video on some further insights on how can we transcend the level of the ego identity or the narrative, or what does that look like, although I think I've done justice to that in this video. But so bear with me in the weeks to come. There may be 1 or 2 more videos as I reflect on where we've come to in the series, and I will have a think about if I can add something that would be of more value. If from watching this series from the beginning you feel like there are some other topics or unanswered questions that might be helpful for me to address in a follow-up video, please briefly put that in the comments section, and I really look forward to connecting with you again, as I can't believe we're rapidly really approaching the end of the year as we enter the final quarter. It's going to be spring here soon in Sydney, so I'm looking forward to getting a bit more vitamin D, and I hope that all of you are in good health, that you're facing whatever struggles you need to face in your life with courage. And I want to thank you all so very much for being such a wonderful online community. And we are about to hit 100,000 subscribers, God willing, very soon. So I look forward to being with you and seeing you again. All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.